Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull. Happy Monday to everybody. It's been a very long and busy weekend for me, but I will be getting back to everyone's comments. And in today's video, we'll be talking about, of course, our baseball team heading on to the Super Regionals. We have to talk about a couple of prospects as well that went on some OVs last weekend, and they were leaning to Tennessee at least for the past few weeks, some of them even longer than that. Now they're leaning elsewhere. Should we be concerned? I think that in some cases, we most definitely should be. And I also want to talk about our quarterbacks over the past 3 seasons, Hendon Hooker, Joe Milton, and Nico. I want to compare them and just take a look at their throwing charts, things like that, and see how does Nico stack up and why should Vol fans maybe be a little bit concerned heading into 2024, but also why we should be very optimistic about 2024. But please, as always, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, so let's start off with our baseball team. Since we last spoke, we beat Indiana 12-6. Then we went on yesterday to beat Southern Miss 12-3 to head on to the Super Regionals. And I think that our Vols looked great yesterday from top to bottom, finding a way to win. That's what it's all about if you want to win a national title. And feels like this team could be destined to win the whole doggone thing. Now, as we're looking at the box score, let's pay attention to the top 3 batters, which is really our top 3 players on this team. That's our most consistent players. Simo has no hits, but he does get an RBI. He gets walked a couple times. Looked like he was kind of pressing up there at the plate early on, but I'm glad that he was able to settle down and settle in and make these pitchers throw him strikes. Blake Burke has 1 hit. He got walked a couple times. Same thing there, right? Just kind of swinging at some junk, but finding that patience, right? Just being able to see that ball a little bit better and not swinging at a whole bunch of junk. Love to see that. Billy Barrels, no hits. I think he got walked once or twice. But again, just finding a way to be productive even without being as productive as they normally are. But the biggest thing about this is, again, with those being our top 3 players on this team, not having their best outing, you're looking at their teammates, picking them up, having a really good game. Let's come all the way down here to this bottom gray box, and we'll see that we hit 5 home runs, 2 by Cal Stark, who is a Knoxville native. That second one actually set the school record with 159 home runs on the season for our team. So that's really impressive. The bats are getting hotter and hotter. And, I just could not be happier with the way that we're looking there. Also, I feel like the fielding has looked pretty good. But let's talk about pitching because this is what matters the most. And Xander had a really good outing. Okay, he gets 3 strikeouts. And then Nate Snead comes in, and he also gets 3 strikeouts. I think that they did a great job. You see, we only had to pitch 2 guys, only threw 124 pitches. And Southern Miss pitched, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. And, they still could not stop us. So it's an absolute nightmare to pitch to this lineup. Now, in the Super Regionals, we're going to be playing up against the winner of East Carolina and Evansville. And they're going to be playing at some point today. So we'll be keeping a close eye out on that game. Hopefully we can advance forward past the Super Regionals and make it to the World Series. But again, y'all, I love the way that this team looks. Batting looks great. I think that the fielding looks really good, man. Simo had a few really nice plays. I think that Dean Curley looks really good playing at shortstop. Amick has got to work on his defense some. I don't know what happened. It looks like he had a little bit of a lapse of focus out there, in some points. But the biggest thing for me has always been about the pitching, and the pitching looks really good. I feel very confident now that we have several guys that we can put out there and that we can trust. That's the biggest thing, is just kind of being deep at the, pitching position. It's not always just about having just like a super stud, which I think that we have a couple of guys that are kind of turning into that at this point. But we've got a lot of guys that are very, very, very good. I was just really proud of Xander going out there, taking that hit to his leg, I think 105 miles an hour off the bat, right to his leg. I mean, from 60 feet away from home plate, something like that. I mean, that has to hurt. Okay, he goes down for just a couple of seconds, but gets back up, comes out, finishes out that inning with 3 straight outs. So, I mean, it's things like that that I feel like is very impressive with this team. And then, it just kind of feels like, again, we are on our way to win the whole thing. Feels like that's our destiny. But let's go ahead and switch gears to recruiting. And we've talked about how important this season is going to be for Coach Heupel, right? This is kind of like his prove-it season. He's got to get over the hump in a couple of different areas. And one of them is going out on the road and winning on a consistent basis. And then on that same kind of token, we've got to beat the teams that we're supposed to beat every season. Seems like since Heupel has been here, we've lost a game every single year that we had no business losing. We felt good coming into it, and we come out of it scratching our heads like, how the heck did we lose this game? And really, it's not always just a loss. We kind of get blown out. So he needs to get those things fixed, and I think that he will. But another thing that he needs to work on is closing out players that are leaning towards Tennessee. at the end of the cycle. And we've got 3 guys right here that we're going to talk about that are leaning to Tennessee. A couple of them have been leaning to Tennessee for quite some time, and now they're either leaning to another school or they're even with us. Now, I will say this, okay? We're going to take a look at their visits because that's very important. Sometimes with these young men, they'll go on these official visits and they will kind of say, wow, this is unbelievable. And they are kind of riding this high, right? Like they're riding this wave really high up, and they feel like, man, this is the best school in the whole world. So I think that we might have 3 players that are just like that. And we're going to pay attention to what their visit list looks like. The biggest thing is just going to be, do they commit on those visits? And if they don't, then I think that Tennessee is in a pretty good spot. And the first player that we're going to be looking at today is going to be Onis Konanbanny, 4-star cornerback from South Carolina. He's got the length, everything that we really want. He came out of the A65 log with Tennessee as his number 1. But as we scroll on down here to his visits, you actually can't even see that visit here. It's not listed, but he just went to Florida State this past weekend. And I believe that Florida State is now even with Tennessee. But look at the rest of his visits, right? He's already visited Utah, I believe, way back in April, okay? And then he also has North Carolina that's coming up. He's got Penn State that's coming up after that, but he's got us last. So if he's a player that pretty much is, riding the highs of these visits, then we could expect, as long as he makes it through all of his OVs, that Tennessee should be the last man standing whenever it really, really counts. So I'm not too worried about Onis. Next player is Charles House, 6'3", 300-pound, 3-star defensive tackle. I think he's going to end up getting bumped up to a 4-star before it's all said and done. But this is a guy that Tennessee's been on for a while, and he has been leaning to Tennessee for quite some time. Now, as we come down here to his visits, he just visited Alabama last weekend, and it sounds like they are now tied up with Tennessee, okay? I think it's kind of been neck and neck, but should we be concerned about this? I don't think so, because like we just talked about with Onis, look at his next visits. He has UGA that's coming up next weekend, and then his last visit is going to be to our Tennessee Volunteers. I think that we are in a good spot with Charles House. And the last player is going to be Shady Hayward, 4-star safety from South Georgia, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's been leaning to Tennessee for a while. I've gone as far as to even say I think he might be silently committed to Tennessee. Just came off of his official visit to UGA this past weekend, and Steve Wiltfong said that UGA is now his leader, and Austin Price more or less confirmed that. Now, as we're looking at his visits, it's going to be the exact same deal, right? He's got Southern California coming up this weekend. He's got Florida the weekend after that, and he's got our Volunteers last. Now, Shady is the player that I'm a little bit concerned about. I'm not going to lie to y'all. He's from South Georgia. Kirby Smart is also from South Georgia. And typically, players from South Georgia either go to Florida State or they go to UGA. That's just how it normally works out. Now, you will see some outliers. Some of those players will go on down to Florida. Some will come up to Tennessee. We have several players from South Georgia. But I am a little bit concerned about this one. No question. I still would say that as long as he makes it through all of his OVs without committing anywhere, and we're going to be that last team that gets a shot to kind of, see what everyone else did and give him the best sales pitch out of any other program, I think that we will end up landing him. That will be really big for us. But that's one that I would say keep a very close eye on that. And I promise you that's going to be one that I'm watching very closely, because I would say that for me personally, he's probably my favorite player in this entire class. He's just so versatile. He's so explosive. And I think that he's going to be an absolute star on the college level and, really even beyond that. But we could talk about just a few other players, right? Travis Smith also went down to UGA. That's the 4-star wide receiver from Westlake High School. And I felt like he was going to Georgia pretty much the entire time. But Tennessee's still in a pretty good spot with him. David Sanders, I believe, just came off of his OV at Clemson. Didn't hear a peep about that at all, right? Like Dabo's putting these little corny, cringy videos out and stuff. And David Sanders is nowhere to be seen in that. So I think Tennessee's in a really great spot with him. If we're in a good spot with him, we should also be in a really good spot with Josh Petty. And I would have to anticipate that other players will want to come and play with us as we're getting more and more high caliber, 5-star types of guys committing to us. That's what we can expect moving forward. So overall, y'all, I would just say this is kind of what the ebbs and flows are of, OV season. Players are going to like one school one week. They're going to like another one on the next week. That's just how it goes. If we can be that last team that gets that OV 9 times out of 10, we're probably going to be the team that lands that player. So I think that we're fine moving forward. All right, now for the last segment of the day, let's talk about our quarterbacks over the past 3 seasons and what their throwing chart looks like. We've heard a lot about man, Hendon Hooker did a great job of throwing the ball over the middle of the field, and that Tennessee didn't do a great job of doing that with Joe Milton, right? Just because maybe we didn't trust him, or maybe he just didn't trust himself to do it as much. And we're thinking and hoping and anticipating that we'll get the middle of the field back with Nico and maybe some other things too. We feel like the offense should be a lot closer to 2022 up under Nico than 2023. So let's take a look at the numbers and see what the differences are between all three of these quarterbacks. And let's start off with the attempts of each quarterback. Okay, so this is Hendon Hooker from 2022. And also pay attention to this. If you look over to the right, you'll see the yard line markers. Okay, so everything on the first level at the bottom is behind the line of scrimmage. The second one, as you move on up, is from the line of scrimmage to 10 yards down the field. After that, it's going to be 10 yards to 20 yards. And then the last one is going to be 20 plus yards. Okay, and it's obviously split up from the outside left to between the numbers to the outside right. And what we're seeing right here with Hendon Hooker, everything that's red means really good. Orange means pretty good. Yellow means not as good. That's just the best way for you to look at it if you don't want to look at the individual numbers. But with Hendon Hooker, most of his attempts came in the middle of the field, right? It's right here in this area. And he also had some good amount of attempts on deep passes across the board. Now, as you're looking at Joe Milton's numbers from 2023, you can see that the chart looks pretty much the same, okay? There are some slight differences, a couple of different variants, but for the most part, the attempts are going to the same places. And as we're looking at Nico's numbers from 2023, the first thing that might kind of jump out to y'all is that deep left and that deep middle have 0 attempts. So we didn't even attempt to throw it there. A lot of that is going to be by design. That's Coach Heupel. He's trying to protect Nico. And, he didn't even get a whole lot of throws here. So we're just paying attention to how does he kind of match up with Hendon Hooker from 2022 and Joe Milton from 2023. But we're seeing that he does, his chart kind of looks the same pretty much outside of that, just not throwing the ball deep as much. All right, now for accuracy, starting off with Hendon Hooker, we see where he's red hot at, everything that's close to the line of scrimmage from behind it to 10 yards down the field, he's on fire at. And then the middle of the field, right there in that intermediate level from 10 to 20 yards, the middle of the field, 52%. And then that deep out, he's 75% there. Now the deep out to the left, he's only throwing 40%. And then the deep ball to the left, 47%. The middle of the field is a place that I think all these quarterbacks will be very, very efficient at, 52%. And then the deep pass to the right was his least accurate pass of 2022. And Joe Milton's chart looks very similar to Hendon Hooker's, but the middle of the field right here, that's where he's not as good as Hendon Hooker was, but he is better at this part of the field than Hendon Hooker was. All right, now let's look at Nico's accuracy chart. It looks very different from Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton's. Of course, we know that those deep passes, we didn't throw a whole lot of those with Nico, and it could be a question of can he do it or not, but I don't know if that really is a question, right? I think that he can do it, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But what I want for you to pay very close attention to is these two areas right here, 100%, albeit only with 4 passes, but 100% in these areas, the most difficult throw to make as a quarterback in football. I think that is part of the reason that Nico is going to be very, very special for us moving forward. And let me tell y'all why. Number one, the middle of the field is going to be open because of our offensive scheme. We know that Hendon Hooker was able to throw the ball to the middle of the field pretty much all the time. Joe Milton had people open across the middle, didn't always hit them, but we see that he did put up some numbers there as well. Nico's going to be the exact same way once Coach Heupel opens up the offense to him on a week in and week out basis. And the reason that it's going to be so open is because our wide receivers are going to line up all the way over to the sideline. The defense has got to match up with it. So it's not going to be as many players in the middle of the field. Those passes will be a lot easier. Another reason that I think that the middle will definitely be back in play for us, and then Nico will be, maybe even more successful there than Hendon Hooker or than Joe Milton's, because he's got 3 tight ends that are better than any tight end that they play with, and I don't mean that as a knock on anyone. It just is what it is. Ethan Davis, Holden Stays, and Miles Kitselman, at least on paper, right? They look like they're going to be studs. They're much more athletic than anything that Coach Heupel has had, and that room is deep. We could even throw Charlie Browder into that mix as well. He's looked really good in preseason. So Nico will have those safety blankets to throw to across the middle of the field, and it's going to be open. He's going to be able to hit his open people. We're not too concerned about that. Now, once we talk about that deep out area that we, just we're touching on, Nico looks more efficient there already than Hendon Hooker and then Joe Milton. And it's not just based off of the numbers, but just in watching him play. If you watch his high school film, you're seeing him dissecting up defenses on the outside. He does that a lot. But even playing with us in the orange and white games, he's had several plays, and not even just in those games, but also, in the Citrus Bowl, whenever he plays, that is a spot that he's able to hit people at all the time. That's the most difficult throw to make in football. That's the throw that the NFL scouts are looking at. And, for a quarterback is, hey, you got to be able to make this throw if you're going to be playing NFL ball. But Nico does it with ease. And with that being the most difficult throw, and he's making that with ease, especially with the way that we kind of like line up and all that type of stuff, I just think that everything else is going to be so in play. It's going to be so open that, man, he's going to put up some crazy numbers. Now, we do also have to address the deep left and the deep middle where he has not thrown the ball at. We've got to see him do it. That's got to be proven. Okay, now I have seen him do it in his high school film. I've seen him kind of make some throws in practices here and there, and those look good. But, he has not thrown them in real live game situations. I don't know that it's a reason for us to be concerned. I just think that Coach Hype will say, hey, look, we'll throw those if we need to, but we don't need to. Maybe Nico isn't as good at those throws. Maybe that's why he hasn't thrown them at all. But I think that it's just mostly because he hasn't played a whole lot, right? Like the only game that he really played in was versus Iowa in that Citrus Bowl. We didn't really need to throw the ball there on a very consistent basis. We had to make sure that we got everyone some touches, and then too, our offensive line was kind of makeshift. So, you want to make sure that you keep Nico upright if you feel like, hey, man, those passes take a lot longer to block for, and we just didn't feel like maybe our offensive line could hold up. It could be a multitude of different factors, but I do have to throw that out there that could be a possibility. But again, seeing him doing it in his film, I don't think there's any cause for concern there. So that's just a, quick little light look at the differences between our quarterbacks and some of the similarities, over the past few seasons. But yeah, I definitely think that Nico already being as efficient as he's shown us with that deep out pass, we know that the middle of the field and those deep passes, all that's going to come. That's just part of this offense, especially if you're hitting those outside, that deep out throw. If you're hitting those, now all of a sudden those deeper passes will most definitely be there because we're going to run those switch routes, all that. It's going to be almost impossible to stop. But that's going to be it for this video, y'all. Thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end. Please make sure, as always, to like, subscribe, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.